All right, well, Pam is on her phone still. Hey guys, everybody, thank you for logging in.
Hello, we are Cesar and Pam with cesarandpam.com.
And we want to help you learn how to lead your children, how to be their leader without breaking your friendship with them. We've been talking about several subjects in the past. We have 6 kids, and we're going to be concentrating more in parenting in the next foreseeable future because we've seen a great need. People have been asking us about it, and we want to be able to help you as you try to do whatever you feel you're being called to do, to be able to not overlook the most important aspect, which is in your family, other than your marriage, in your parenting. And I think one of the biggest balances that people struggle with is, how do I balance being their leader while still being their friend? How do I remain their boss and set the limits and still keep the friendship? Or how do I remain their friend? How do I be their friend without them losing respect for me? And
I think, how does that look as, sorry, having this issue with my voice, keep losing it. How does it look when they're younger, and how does it look when they're older?
Yes.
Because it looks different as their leader and as their friend.
Yeah, and today we're going to talk about that question, right? Has your kid ever told you, you don't love me, or you don't care about me? Or maybe they would not say it to you, but they would say it to a friend or to another person. I was with my younger son today, well, not younger son, but we have 6 kids. So we have a girl who's married, she's 26, then a boy who's 24, who's also married. Then we have a 20-year-old at home. We have a 16-year-old at home, and a 13 and a 12-year-old at home. And my 16-year-old, I was asking him, what's the opposite? We're going to tell you the secret word here in a minute. What is the opposite, or what would make somebody, a teenager feel, or a child feel like they are not loved, like we don't care? And if you don't listen to them, if you don't give them the word empathy with your actions. So how many of you have had that situation where, as parents, we are so used to giving sermons, giving lectures right away, instead of listening and trying to understand the situation before we try to give a solution? Is that something common, honey? Does that happen a lot?
All the time. I think, I remember, one of the tips that I heard for homeschooling, when you read a good book, so many times we're tempted to read something that has a really great message and then stop and want to give a sermon about it to our kids. And this person was saying, don't do that. Let the story speak to them. Let them take it in and get the message. We don't always have to reiterate everything. We don't have to spell it out for them. And I think that it's true in everything, I think you're going to talk about it. You are going to talk about it, but we need to ask questions more than just tell them what to think, right?
Yeah. Here's this quote that I have in my notes. There are moments that more than teaching, leading, or solving their problems, we need to listen and understand, especially when they're experimenting, they're going through experiencing consequences of their actions, whether it be happiness, sadness, frustration, anger. And I remember one time, all of our kids have been involved in speech and debate. And when we discovered that activity, we homeschool our kids, and our oldest were 14 and 12, and we got them into speech and debate. And our 14-year-old wasn't so easy for her, but she eventually became very good at it. Our 12-year-old, he was really excited about it and became really good at it. And then the time came for Nicholas to start at age 12, and he did not want to do it. I mean, he just struggled. Remember that one time when we tell the story?
Well, that was before he was 12, because his older siblings were involved. He was in juniors. And so as an 8-year-old, it came time for him to do his first speech at a little tournament. And it didn't mean going into a room with thousands of people. It was going into a room with 3 older students who were going to give him feedback and mostly smile at him. And he just had to give his, 2 to 3 minute speech. And we had practiced, and it was a good speech. I remember I helped him a lot, and he was ready. But when it came time, there was a girl that went into the room, and as soon as she went into the room, he knew he was next, and he just broke down. And I wasn't just crying. I mean, it was like sobbing and hyperventilating. He couldn't get his breath. And I didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my goodness, am I going to be that mom? It's like felt so mean to just make him go in there. And I just remember looking at him and talking to him and being like, Nico, I'm sorry. It's so hard. I get it. I mean, it's scary, but just trust me. Like, it's never going to be this hard again. If you go in there this time and you get through this, which you will, it's never going to be this hard again. And it was hard to kind of give him that push. You can do it. Go on in. And he went in there. He could hardly breathe and talk. But when he came out, I remember he just looked at me and smiled, and he felt good about himself. And that was such a relief.
So the point of this empathy that we're supposed to have is not take away whatever is frustrating them on, or maybe scaring them, but it's understanding that fear, empathizing with the fear, not making fun of it, and helping them go through it, helping them deal with it, right? Understanding their temptations and their fears. There is an example here from a book. I have some notes here of a mom. The junior hit his little sister, and when she came, mom asked him, "Why did you hit your sister?" And Junior said, looking at the floor, "I don't know." And then she asked him, "What do you mean, I don't know?" And he says, "I don't know." Has that happened to you, mom or dad, where your kid cannot tell you exactly why they did something?
Yeah. I think we forget that they are children. We want them to rationalize the situation the way we are. And we often want to ask why. We expect that it was premeditated, they thought it through, and then they did something, right? But that's not always the situation.
The problem is that we are asking the wrong questions. On the next segment, I'm going to talk about those questions. In the meantime, if you know parents who need help, need direct coaching, we're starting a coaching program on how to become your child's leader without breaking the friendship. Share this information with them, subscribe to our channel, like it on cesarandpam.com. And we would love to help you, because there's a crisis today, especially with the COVID, with the quarantine. Parents do not know what to do. Many parents don't know what to do with their kids to be able to develop that balance between friendship and leadership. So let's continue. So what would have been some better questions that mom could have asked Junior? What were you feeling when you hit your sister? Something specific. Mm-hmm. See, because when you ask him, why did you do that? That child doesn't have, he cannot answer, because he doesn't have the depth of understanding and self-reflection to be able to respond coherently to that question. Even as adults, sometimes that's a very complicated question. Think about yourself when you're really mad or really frustrated or really sad, and they ask you, why did you do that? And you might say, I don't know. It was spur of the moment. So what do? Ask simpler questions like, what? Go ahead.
Yeah. Besides, what were you feeling? What did your sister do that made you mad? Or help me understand how hitting seemed to be the answer to this problem. How was it going to make things better? And
what was the problem with what she was doing to you?
And then what other ways could you have responded? Mm-hmm. I think that is a super important thing to think through, because we need to give them tools to think, okay, how could I respond? And the situation is going to happen again, probably with siblings, right? But what could you have done? What should you do? I mean, that happens a lot. We have one son who just little things bother him, right? Like they get on his nerves and gets overwhelmed by it. And so it's easy for the other son, the brother, to just keep doing it because it's like, what's the big deal? I'm not really doing anything wrong. And that's a hard one, because he really isn't doing anything wrong. And yet in that moment, his brother is weak. So we've had to work with both of them. For the younger one who's getting frustrated, it's, can you express first? Don't just go from 0 to 100 of anger and frustration, yelling, stop it, stop doing that. No, talk to him first. Hey, could you please stop tapping the table? Or could you please stop humming? Could you please stop whistling? I mean, sometimes it's like every little thing. Um, and then for the older one, sometimes it's just to say, you know what? You're the strong one here, and your brother's the weak one, and you are called to defend the weak. You have to take care of the weak. That's your position. So in this, where you have strength, where you could keep bothering him, even though you're not really doing something wrong, we, could you consider just making it easy for him right now?
Yeah.
And this challenge.
I think the biggest challenge that we have as parents is we want to talk. We want to give lectures. We're going to give explanations instead of asking questions and drawing it out of our kids without judging them. Here's a really interesting example from another author. And he talks about an example of what would happen if you bought your child some tennis shoes and they didn't like the tennis shoes, right? And they cost you a lot of money. But at night when you brought them to him, he didn't like them. And next morning you see he's putting them on, but he's going to cry. Well, first he precedes the explanation with the two possible options of how you could respond with this. The finest art of communication is not learning how to express your thoughts. It is learning how to draw out the thoughts of another. We need to discover to help our children articulate their thoughts and feelings. The first objective in correction is not telling your child how you feel about it, but is to try to understand what is going on inside them. Understanding the nature of the struggle they're having. What is the content of the abundance of their heart, and what should their response be? For example, you notice that your kid is putting those brand new shoes and they don't like them, and the bad response would be, so you don't like the tennis shoes, right? Look, I know you don't like them, but that's all I could afford. Don't be such a baby. What would Jared say if I told him you were crying over something like this? They're just going to get messed up anyway. In a couple of days, no one will even know what they look like. Why do you care about what those kids think about your sneakers? Who made them experts anyhow? You should be thankful you even have them. Those sneakers you don't like cost more than my first car. Look, I gotta go to work. I have more important things to worry about than sneakers. How many times we have given a similar response? Instead, what if your primary goal is to understand the child's internal struggle? What if you could instead have a conversation like this? You're upset about the sneakers, aren't you? Yeah. I didn't think you liked them when we bought them last night. You didn't want to tell me, did you? No. What don't you like about them? They look stupid. What do you mean? Well, Jared says they look stupid. When did Jared see them? We just got them last night. Well, Chris got a pair just like his, and Jared told everybody in class he looks like a dork. What looks dorky about him? Well, the red stripe on the back. They don't put the red stripe on the new ones. They're last year's shoes. That's why they're only $87. Oh, in that moment, you need to take a deep breath and say, oh, I see. So you're afraid they will call you a dork today, right? Yeah, that hurts, doesn't it? Yeah, I don't know why they should care about what my shoes are like, but I know they will call me a dork. So what are you learning there? Your child is struggling with feelings that you can identify with. Maybe you can't identify with sneakers. Maybe you can identify with the fact that somebody you know is making more money than you at your job or in your business. Somebody's killing it and you can't figure out how to make more money. He's dealing with rejection. He's dealing with acceptance, with thoughts of approval, feelings of approval. You can understand that. Insecurity. So we need to learn to look at the world through their eyes, to have that conversation. Listen instead of talking.
Yeah. And I think it takes time. It takes time to listen. And so often we give a sermon or we tell them what to think because we just want it to be over with. Mm-hmm. And that does just create the barrier where they're just going to think, they don't really care. They don't get me. And so as they grow older, that becomes a wall between the two of you. And then you're wanting them to share, you're wanting them to express their thoughts about something. And they're like, no, why? They think you're not going to listen. So you want to start when they're young and it takes time. You can't just solve the situation. You need to empathize, talk about it, and then keep that door open because when they're older, they're going to know that you take the time to listen.
And before we go to our last section, if you know anybody who would like to get some help, we're going to start a parenting, we're starting a coaching program for parenting. We want to help parents how to become your child's leader without breaking the friendship. How do you become their friend without losing respect for you? We want to help you with that. Make sure you share this video with that person if you know they're struggling with that. And follow us on Cesar and Pam, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And now we go to the last section for the conclusion. All right, honey. So, listening. Empathy has to do with listening into drawing out the thought of another person. Proverbs 25 says, I think I have that here.
I don't know it memorized.
I lost it. Oh, no, wait, it's right here. Oh, man, I don't know. I have it on my Spanish notes. Something like this. The purposes of a man are like deep waters, and it is a man of understanding who draws them out. Our goal is to figure out how to understand what our kids are going through and help them understand what they're going through.
Yeah, draw that out for sure. I think it's deeper than we think, and you're going to find as your kids grow older that it takes even more time, and it's going to look different than it does when they're little. I think we're always learning in this area.
Yeah, there's a quote from an amazing book called Tips on Child Training Tips. This is from the 1800s, and it's got an amazing paragraph that is going to be in Spanish. I'm going to translate it, so if I'm struggling, that's why. Inspire your children. Don't push them. Make it attractive for them to turn to you, to someone stronger and bigger than them in times of need, temptation, and failure. Don't tell them how wrong they are, how strange it is that they struggle with such a thing. That will only isolate them and will make them build a wall to protect themselves from your undesirable friendship. Oof, that is just so heavy. And how many times I've made that mistake of being too quick to react when they're struggling with something, even though I know that it has no reason for them to be afraid or frustrated or angry with a certain thing. I remember one time when Cesar Jr., he was a little kid. He was probably like 8 or 9 years old, and we told him to take the trash to the curb. And all of a sudden, I heard him crying. Like he fell, sounded like he fell with the trash can. And he turned around, and he was bleeding. His whole face was full of blood. And he was so scared. So I ran to him, and I had a Kleenex, and I wiped it, and I thought he had cut himself right here. And that was not the moment to get mad. And I've made that mistake many times. But that moment, I knew that he needed a friend. So what I did, took him to the bathroom, cleaned it up, washed him, and then put pressure on his forehead and took him to the emergency room and calmed him down and told him, don't worry, the head bleeds a lot. I remember that from my dad, being a doctor in Mexico, telling me that. And we just talked him through it. And at the end, the most important memory was not just that accident that he went through, but the fact that he had a friend going through it with him. So many times the consequence, it's enough.
Yeah, that happens a lot when they're little. I remember Marco was little, and we had told him not to climb up onto the top of the Suburban, and because we didn't want him to get cut by scrape his leg on the license plate. And sure enough,
because he was sliding down.
Yeah, it was sliding down. So sure enough, he did it again, and he slid down and he sliced his leg on the license plate. And like you said, it's not the time to see, I told you so. That's why you need to listen to me. That's the time life already gave him the consequence, and you just need to comfort and help him get through it.
Yeah, the natural consequence was enough. So to build a friendship through that struggle, just walk through it with them. Respect their fears. I have some notes here from when we did this as a conference. A fear is a perception of danger. Don't ridicule their fear. Otherwise, you will train your child to avoid conflict, to avoid being ridiculed. And sometimes fear, it's unfounded, and sometimes it has a reason. Like If they're afraid of lightning, you're inside the house, explain to them, show them the lightning, Google it and show them the effects of it so that they would understand it. And sometimes it's real, right? When we live in Texas and there are tornadoes here sometimes, it's a real thing. Go and get in the closet and
Didn't know what to do.
don't be afraid to be vulnerable, to show that you're afraid to, if you believe in God, to pray to God together so they can see you walking through that with them.
Makes you relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just thinking of other examples, I just know that I'm so guilty of sometimes taking opportunities when life is given a consequence to give a sermon and it doesn't work, and I just,
Lectures.
yeah, like, our son that's older, maybe it's that he took a test or did something and he didn't get the grade he wants. And I think that I want to tell him, well, did you study enough? I mean, you were going out with your friends. Did you really put time into it? But that's not what he needs to hear right then. He already got the consequence with the grade. He needs to I just need to listen and empathize. Man, that's really tough, And then, maybe that would open up the conversation of how can I help you? What can we do before the next test?
Yeah.
Maybe not. So better to say less
So,
when they're older.
If you want to change that perspective, if your kid has said or has felt that you don't love them, that you don't care about them, that's a reason why. Learn to empathize. And if you want to learn how to become a leader without breaking the friendship with your child, and people that may benefit from this material, share the content with them. Subscribe to our channel, follow us. We're going to start a coaching program. We just started having the first 2 people that we're helping. We're looking for 2 more moms or dads who want to receive some personalized coaching so that you can learn how to become your child's leader or your teenager's leader without breaking your friendship, and how to be their friend without them losing respect for you. Is that balance where you can find the key of great parenting through many mistakes that we've made over the years. So
we're Cesar and Pam with cesarandpam.com. Let us know your thoughts, your questions, and we'll be back next week.
Write your comments right here. See you next week.